Good evening. A warm welcome to you to this panel discussion. My name is Johannes Voswinkel. I'm the director of the Kyiv office of Heinrich Böll Foundation. This will be the first panel of Kyiv Dialogue 2025, Human Security and Decentralized Recovery. To give you some kind of rough outline, it will be a high-level panel on strong communities and regions as a backbone of resilience in Ukraine, but also on the existential fight that Ukraine is fighting, while at the same time reforming the whole country according to the rules and standards and demands of the European Union. A real big task to do. If we talk about the European integration, and Mr. Kuleba did this before, and he stressed the importance, we should ask, where does Ukraine stand now on the way to the European Union? If you have a look at the last EU progress report, the progress report stated, what concerns Ukraine, considerable efforts to join the EU, despite the difficult situation in which the country is. But the progress report also stated that Ukraine must increase the pace of its reforms if it wants to achieve its goals on the path to the united Europe. And we have to keep in mind, Ukraine's ambitious goal is to finish negotiations until 2028. This progress report painted a rather multi-faced, partly, I don't know, it doesn't work. It does, yeah. This report painted a multi-faced picture, partly hopeful, very positive, of course, also stressing the amazing resilience of Ukraine society, thanks also to the local level, the amazing resilience of the society, but also we want to enrich the discussion about the way of Ukraine with this panel with outstanding speakers today, whom I want to introduce to you just in a second. Just one thing, what concerns, let's say, the agenda of the panel. We will have about 1 hour for the discussion, and then there will be the possibility for you to ask questions to the speakers. And afterwards, it's about 1.5 hours, there will be a little surprise as we have to celebrate the birthday, which was already mentioned, and after that, there will be a buffet. So in every respect, I hope this will be an interesting and satisfying evening for you. And now I would come to introduce to you the guests of our panel discussion. If you had a look at the program was already mentioned, you might see that a bit has changed because flu and illness has to a certain extent stirred up our panel discussion, but we are glad nevertheless to have very outstanding speakers, and I would like to introduce them to you. First, we'll have Mr. Taras Kachka, who is still not with us, and he will only be online with us. He is Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration of Ukraine. He will be online with us a bit later, about 15-20 minutes later, and he will, as he is still in a meeting with the Prime Minister of Ukraine. I'm very glad to have here on the panel, Ms. Ulrike Hopp-Nishanka. She is head of Task Force Ukraine of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ. The task force, just to make this clear, was established at BMZ to support recovery and reconstruction in Ukraine. Then we have Mr. Vitalii Lukov. He's the first deputy mayor of the city of Mykolaiv. He works on issues related to economic development, municipal property management, emergency situations, financial policy and budgeting, as well as housing matters. And I would like to add, for the record, Mykolaiv is, as you know, a strategically important city on the southern Bug River. And the city, we now see a lot of attacks on infrastructure in Ukraine. The city of Mykolaiv has suffered from these kind of attacks from the very beginning of the full-scale invasion. For example, in April 2022, Mykolaiv had no more water supply. So it's really a city which suffered a lot and still suffers. And by the way, you may remember Mykolaiv otherwise, because Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock had to cut short her visit to Mykolaiv in 2024 due to a Russian drone cycling above the heads. And last but not least, on our panel is Mr. Krzysztof Stanowski. He is the director of the International Cooperation Center of the city of Lublin in Poland. And I'm very glad also to get some kind of Polish perspective from your side. So we will start now. Mr. Kachka will join us a bit later. And I would like even to change a bit my concept in the sense that I have a very spontaneous question to Ms. Hopp-Nishanka in the beginning, because I listened to, especially I listened to what the Mr. Ambassador said. Spontaneously, what did you learn from your work with Ukraine? You have a microphone.
What did I learn? First of all, and I think most importantly is, and that applies to this situation, you be prepared for whatever comes your way, right? And you think ahead, and you plan ahead, and you rely on your friends and your networks, and you work together as much as you can, and create synergies of whatever is there as resources that you have. And I think that ingenuity and that creativity and that agility is something that we can learn every day and apply every day to every situation, including me coming in 2 minutes ago to sit into this panel with you, which I didn't know an hour ago.
Yeah, thanks a lot to you for this spontaneous possibility to talk to you. Yeah, we learn a lot from Ukraine. I listened to what Mr. Kuleba said. One point was very interesting. There were a lot of interesting points, but one I wanted to stress and ask might be to Mr. Lukov. Mr. Kuleba stressed that it's very important to empower the municipalities and local communities in Ukraine. If you take the situation now during the war, there is a certain centralization of power going on, which is quite natural. To which extent you in Mykolaiv, for example, feel empowered enough on the ground for all the tasks that you have to deal with?
Добрий день.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me for this. I'm honored to represent my city and my country here on this panel. And I would start with something unexpected. We spoke today about the mayor of Kherson, and I would like to speak about Alexander Babic. He is the mayor of a city also in Kherson region. He was abducted in 2022 and to this day his family doesn't know where he is. He is obviously a captive of the savages. And the only reason is that he didn't want to collaborate and he wanted to stay with his community, with his town. And we have multiple stories like this in Ukraine, and this is just another demonstration of the fact that people who are willing to take the responsibility and to be heads of communities, they are no accidental people. They are really people who are very engaged, who want to be there. And this reform, particular reform of decentralization, was the most successful one in Ukraine. And I wanted to thank you again and to stress that there is never enough freedom, never enough human rights. Of course, the war is affecting this, but our local governance showed itself to be effective and efficient and flexible, and that we can make decisions, make them quick. And we are in war, and of course the eastern and southern regions were the first to react. If we wanted it or not, we had to support our armed forces to stop those invaders whom we considered as brother before sometimes. And now we can only stress local governance there's never enough powers for us. So I'm not really familiar with the German system. I am familiar with Swedish system, however, and I know that no law can be adopted there without consulting the board or the association of the local government bodies. And in Ukraine, it's not possible at this point. Not yet.
This is not possible, but maybe there are other possibilities to strengthen the local level, especially as I said, a backbone of resilience. What do you see as other possibilities, might be inside of Ukraine, but also coming from friends, partners from outside of Ukraine?
Thank you so much. Yes, you have answered your question in a way. It's a very good example for our government, for our state. This collaboration with our international partners, they trust us, they trust our local government and our society. And here we have this efficiency from this cooperation, and our city, Mykolaiv, was one of the first to react to European anti-corruption initiatives. We have signed this agreement, and we can be more flexible, we can adopt decisions, and we can get this help that is making us more powerful. So we are learning from each other. You are learning from our experience, very bitter experience, but we are also learning from you, from your support for our local government, and we are always thankful for the support.
Thank you. Mr. Stanowski, as I said, the Polish perspective would be also very interesting. We talked about the EU integration process, and especially in this context about reforms. From your perspective, what do you think, which kind of reforms are possible in times of war and are the most pressing one?
I'm not Anna Radwan, who should be here. I just learned a moment ago that I will be on this panel, but I remember when I was Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs during Polish presidency in EU in 2011. There were 3 issues on security which were proposed, put on the table by the Polish side. The first were joint military formations. The second was development of new contemporary arms. And the third was cooperation, EU, NATO, and EU with our partners from Eastern Partnership, mainly Ukraine. And somehow, this is all the time important. From my point of view, the most important reform is decentralization reform. This is the Polish experience. We really empowered local communities 180 days after forming first government. But this is the experience of Ukraine. This is really unbelievable what process of amalgamation of communities, empowering communities was done in the Ukraine after Revolution of Dignity. And when we are thinking from the military point of view, we understand that without strong local governments, without amalgamated communities, the military forces of Ukraine, it would not be enough. The local governments were crucial for the physical defense, both on the south, but also in the north. And this is showing us something what is not so obvious in Ukraine, in Western Europe, also in Poland. The direct connection between the region, between the local government and the army. Local governments in Ukraine supports army. There is direct connection between the community and armed forces. And this is not only about our boys and girls. Please remember the fifth part of the Ukrainian army are women, but it's also about civil society supporting that community. Later on, we'll talk about recovery, but that also means that resilience, it's something what is not category of the government, it's rather category of the society, of the community. And we see the activities like community-to-community support within Ukraine, where those communities which are more on the west are supporting both internally displaced persons, but also these communities which are on the front line or closer to the front line.
I would like to connect with this, a question to Mr. Lukov once again, because he's from the local level. Mr. Lukov, if you think about the decentralization reform, which was called, might be even the most successful reform that has been before the full-scale invasion that has been made in Ukraine. What was the situation at the beginning of the full-scale invasion in your city? To which extent did new powers that you have help you in this situation where you had to act partly on your own, I suppose, and which preconditions were very important for this resilience, the local resilience in Mykolaiv, for example?
Yes, of course, because due to the decentralization we had resources and powers, and it means possibilities. Before the reform, everything, the finances, it was very centralized, and everyone had to go to the central level and to ask for the funds, and it was very slow. So if we had this situation, we couldn't survive the first days. We had to support our people, we had to feed them, and we had to keep them warm. We had to react to these challenges that were so numerous in the first days. And this decentralization gave us this possibility to react. And also, if we have powers, so you have respect, and you are being heard, and also the state bodies and state representatives, they couldn't decide anything without consulting us in these first days, of course, and it was natural. And so if you are independent in your region, so you have this respect, and you are so you have more leverage. And this reform of decentralization was exactly the reason for us to be able to help our armed forces to defend us. If it was still this centralized as it was before, we would lose time and we would lose even more people.
As I said, there was a certain centralization going on because of the war situation, quite naturally. Do you have the impression that now there still is a good balance of centralization and local powers, or would you have some wishes to might be bring it in a better balance now?
I'm not an expert on, I cannot answer every question, but lots of questions emerge every day, but I can only speak from my experience that we have now. Centralization, we need it in military regards and questions. If it's about some global issues, for example, migration within the country, social support, because we cannot have different social welfare in different communities. So it should be centralized, and there should be laws. So if we start with internally displaced persons, it's state policy and state level law. And so we have this mandate from the upper level to take care of the people. It's either the taxes or some funding that's being assigned for this purpose. And yes, the social support also of the veterans, because we cannot have the situation where the veterans have different level of support depending on how wealthy the community or the town is. Of course, these are things that are being decided on the central level. Also housing, and everyone should have the equal rights. Yes, but all the communities have a different level of wealth and possibilities, but it should be enforced. So, as I said, state security, its intelligence, combating the propaganda, these are questions that the state has the monopoly upon, and it should be a really strict policy, and it should be really enforced. We have examples from other countries. I knew one person from Israel, and 2 years ago, when Israel was attacked, we know who were these people. It was a festival, and he was abroad. And when this military law was announced in Israel, this exceptional situation, he came back. He came back immediately, and I asked him why, and he said, "I am a citizen of my country. I cannot do otherwise." So in Ukraine, we don't have these regulations yet. These are questions that the state should decide upon, of course. But the last decision, one of the last decisions last year was that we, the local government, we should control the military enlistment in our community. So, and we had this new responsibility, and of course, we will implement it. But nevertheless, everything that it's about the livelihood and all the provisions in your community, it's our prerogative, and we need some autonomy here, of course.
You wanted to add
Can I make a comment? We should understand that in Ukraine, you cannot complete the decentralization reform without changing constitution. And of course, there is no way you can change constitution during the war. So the decentralization, which was started before the full-scale invasion, should be completed with the very precise delegation of responsibilities on the regional, on the small region county, and on the municipal level. And definitely operating in the war period, this is something which cannot be completed. On the other hand, we should understand that we have local communities in total different situation. situation in Western Ukraine, in Volyn, in Galicia, close to the front, we have also occupied communities. And we have the heads of local governments on exile, working, communicating with the people on occupied territories. The last comment, definitely we understand that we see the very fundamental changes in demography. So the local governments, which were designed with some demographical situation, when you have the fourth part of the inhabitants, or when suddenly you got thousands of inhabitants from other regions, it required to rethink, redesign, first of all, the financial resources of the local government. It's very difficult and important.
We will today still talk about the difficulty of doing a lot of things during wartime. Some of them might be impossible, some might be possible. Decentralization reform was a reform which was heavily supported from Germany, from the German side, was a very successful example. If you look at the whole package of possible reforms in the framework of EU integration process, from the point of view from Germany, which seem to be very urgent reforms, and what can Germany do to support this reform way?
Yeah, thank you. So you mentioned already how close to our understanding of how development, but also recovery in Ukraine has to look like, and transformation, how close that is connected to decentralization reform. And I think that can only be stressed time and again. It's part of the fundamentals. So when we look at what reforms are relevant to Ukraine, of course, we do not need to invent this ourselves. We have within the European Union an understanding of how the EU acquis looks like and how accession will look like. And the organization of the different chapters that accession will be negotiated through outlines also in a way, a certain kind of priority. And most importantly, of course, Chapter 1 with the fundamentals that include decentralization. It says it all in a way that these are also the most relevant reforms. It's not only because of that important, it is also important because around 70% of all reforms for EU accession will have to be implemented at the local level. So not even if you're just talking about decentralization reform, but any other part of the EU accession, the realization, the implementation, the real application of a change and implementation of the legal framework takes place at the local level. And that says actually a lot about how much resources are required, how much expertise is required, how much change and adaptation in each community, municipality in Ukraine will have to be undertaken. This makes it also a bit daunting, I must say, if you really think this through, especially given the situation that so many staff in the city councils, in the local authorities are missing because they're either fighting or they had to leave or they had to relocate. And it's a huge burden, of course, to now not only do your daily business, which is difficult enough with the air raids and no electricity and all that all the families live with, but also to think ahead and actually change the way of doing your work and your business. I mean, for all of us, Germany is also challenged with undertaking reforms. We know how difficult it is for us. Now imagine the same thing under those conditions. What are we asking here? I think it is also important to always reconsider this, how huge this challenge is. Okay, decentralization is one, and I must, of course, mention the other one, which is, I think, to everybody who looks into the situation and the political situation in Ukraine, very clearly known. It is of ultimate importance to carry on with reforms to strengthen the independence of the anti-corruption institutions, to look into the judicial reforms, to ensure the independence of the institutions and boards that are there to overlook state enterprises, and to enact the judicial reforms that are required to also follow through with the accession process. I think we are all very aware of the relevance of this. This has nothing to do necessarily only with EU accession, but again, it's part of the negotiation packages of the relevant chapters. And it's also very important because this is basically the foundation of trust and confidence into where Ukraine wants to go. And so it cannot be underestimated how important especially these reforms are that are requested of Ukrainian institutions in order to fulfill what is expected there, in order to allow for checks and balances and democratic control. And again, I remember the conversations when we started to talk about recovery and how to plan and organize the recovery architecture. The government, the central level government, started with the requirements that are also part of the IMF benchmarks, of course, to implement what is called the Public Investment Management Reforms, PIM, and to start to work on the single project pipeline in order to prioritize recovery needs. They have understood that this has to be taking place at the local level because, again, this is of ultimate importance to us, that the people at the local level decide what their priorities are, because nobody else knows better what is most important and what to start with than the people at the local level and the authorities at the local level. So it's also an opportunity there to show that these reforms are taken very seriously.
I hope this was not too daunting or too frightening, Mr. Lukov, but let's have a look at your situation. Do you have the capacity to think about EU integration with all the problems that you have every day in Mykolaiv? And if this is the case, do you something to prepare for the implementation, or is this not feasible?
We are fighting to make this possible, because I have no doubt the guys and the women and the men who are working under drone, under bombings, they expect from us that with their fight we will protect our pride, our right to live in the future as human beings have right to live.
Дякую.
Thank you.
Я не хочу говорити по-європейськи там чи по-американськи,
I don't
просто
want
по-людськи.
to talk to live like Europeans or Americans, no, just like decent human beings, and our people deserve that. And the question about reforms, it's a question about life and about the development. If you don't work, if you are not ready for reforms, you can't be on that position. You can't take decision because you are not ready to make some changes. I don't know how we can show to our partner that we are ready and that we are capable. Yes, of course. There are some challenges. We will address these challenges. It's our inner question. And also it's about how many personnel we have, our city council. We have 6 people in our city council who has died, and many people are in the armed forces. It's of course a challenge. It's also the fight for the personnel, and we still don't have a decent working conditions, decent payment for the work. So, in order to have a decent payment for the local self-government, the city council has to write, for instance, 300 or 400% more in order to reach like average
середньо по регіону
payment
офіційну заробітну плату.
in the region.
І це вже будь-який
And that
керівник, він на певному гачку
every head
контрольованих органів і з
is
політичної
controlled
точки зору,
politically
і з правової, тому
and
що
also legally, because
400% премії
400% of this
звучить дуже
premium, it sounds
потужно. Насправді
just a
це
lot,
дуже
but
невеликі
in
кошти.
reality,
В державних
it's not much.
службах це питання
So,
вирішено
and
окремим
in civil service,
законом.
this question
В
is
Україні
resolved
чомусь
through
це не
a
на
special
часі.
law,
А це
but
теж
in Ukraine,
один
it's
таких, знаєте,
not implemented yet.
Один з викликів, перед якими
This is one of the
з якими
challenges
постійно стикається місцеве
that
самоврядування в
we
Україні. Тут
face
ми будемо вам
in
вдячні
Ukraine all the
вашим
time, the
діалогом
local
з нашим урядом, що
self-government.
це
And
якраз
we
той
would be
закон,
grateful if
який
you
на час.
conduct a dialogue
Тому що це
with
боротьба за
Ukrainian
якісні
government
кадри,
to introduce
це
this law, because we have
відповідно
a
якісні проекти,
competition
це
for
якісні
high
реформи,
quality
якісні
personnel,
зміни і
and it's
покращення
a
якості
high quality
життя
for
людей в кінці
reform
кінців
and
на
better
місцях.
life quality
Дякую.
for our people. Thank you.
Я відчуваю, що я наговорю багато сьогодні.
I think I have told a lot today. Maybe it's too much.
No. It's at any rate not too much, and I can imagine to which extent some parts of the discussion, for example, about reforms and EU integration, are far, far away from reality, especially near to the front line. So it must sound sometimes absurd, the discussions we nevertheless have to a certain extent to have, because it's about the future of Ukraine too. Mr. Stanowski, you wanted to comment as far as I understand?
Yes, we should recognize the big success. The big success of Ukraine when we are talking about this process. Our colleague mentioned corruption. Yeah, what happened this year? First of all, Ukraine established the public state institution to fight with corruption. Yes, it was a moment when the government thought perhaps it would be useful to cancel this institution. And what happened? They adopted the law in the parliament. And what happened next day? The people went on the street. Yes, with boxes. This is what Ambassador was talking about. And a week later, 10 days later, the parliament met again to cancel this stupid law. When last time you remember such case in Germany? I'm thinking about Poland. Of course, in Germany, nothing. There are no wrong decisions of the government. In Poland, we have some. And I don't remember in last 10 years that civil society went on the street and successfully stopped the decision. So when we are thinking how effectively on the way of dealing with corruption, which definitely is part of the big challenges. And this is something which should prove us that institutions are working, that civil society can support pro-European standards, and that you can stand for the standards, for the values, and this is something really, really important. On other hand, when we are dealing with EU accession negotiations, as EU, we are not very prepared to work with local governments, to work with regions. No, not at all. On other hand, the governments, it was Polish government some years ago, today it's Ukrainian government. The governments tend to believe that EU accession, this is the only governmental issues. This is nothing what civil society or local governments has to do. Somehow we should find a way to change this behavior and to find a way of the cooperation of EU also with communities. As we could hear, the Swedish example is something present in Ukraine. Thank you.
It is, by the way, something that we always stress, that civil society in Ukraine can play other roles than we are used to, for example, in Germany, can play a political role, can, in a very direct way, take part in decision-making also, not only on the local level. This is something that shouldn't be underestimated at any rate. On the other hand, we have sometimes what concerns the anti-corruption case with the law that has been taken back in the end. There are people, more from the European Union, who say it was also thanks to the pressure of the European Union that the law has been taken back. And they say, nevertheless, the reform process, and this is also some partners in Ukraine who say this, the reform process in the framework at which it is possible during war times should be in a certain way, how to say, controlled. And a word which you hear sometimes in Ukraine is the United States are out now, and they were, what concerns reforms, something like a bad guy for a long time. And the Europeans were more, let's say, the good cop. What is the situation now, Ms. Hopp-Nishanka? Do we have to be the bad guy in future?
I'm not sure if we have to be the bad guy. But actually what we hear quite a lot, and of course I have to agree with you, certainly this is an achievement, and certainly it's unheard of in many of our societies that this would happen. Still, I hear a lot when I speak to our colleagues from Ukraine that they ask us to be more outspoken and not so diplomatic in our conversations and dialogue. And so I think this is indirectly a little bit what you're referring to, sort of who wants to be the bad cop, and also point out where things have to be done differently, or maybe explained differently, or taken care of differently. That is certainly true and observable, that there has been a change in the international setup and the international community coming to terms with the fact that the American friends have taken a very different role and stance on many things, not only on Ukraine, globally on many, many topics, climate change, etc., but also with regards, unfortunately, to Ukraine. And what does that leave us with? It doesn't only leave us with a lack of funding for many areas that US funding had been there for. And most painfully, in the areas of strengthening local communities and self-governance, where there was a lot of funding made available through USAID, not only in the area of strengthening civil society and independent media work, which the funding has been cut completely. They seem to be coming back with in some areas with some of the funding, which is very applaudable, and we're very happy, and we're trying to be in close conversation with them to understand where funding can be allocated. But especially in these areas, it is quite painful, and it's a real test now for civil society actors to find their footing and carry on with the important work. So this is something where we will try to step up a little bit, but there's by no means European donors will be able to cover the gaps that have been left behind. We have to be very honest about this. So this is a tough moment. But also in political dialogue, we want to be more outspoken and clear, and in conversation with our European partners about the reforms that are required and what is necessary to carry on at the same time when dealing with all the other facts. What is important, though, I think, is that this is not only the highest level dialogue of Chancellor Merz calling on President Zelensky once in a while. This dialogue is happening at all levels, right? And this is what we're talking about with decentralization. The most important connections are anyway forged people to people, business to business, municipality to municipality, and this is also where the real strength of the dialogue and enacting the change processes are. And I remember that very often, initially, when the recovery architecture was set up, it was said, let's not do this at the local level because there might be corruption. Let's rather do it at the central government level. Now we understand that this is a challenge at every level, and therefore every level has to be engaged in these reforms and enacting these processes.
If we look once again at the local level, Mr. Lukov, what kind of reforms are local communities especially waiting for? What would be, from your perspective, especially important to reform in the coming time?
Well, basically, we'd rather finish those reforms that were already started. Well, it would be better not to start new reform without finishing the previous one. So, well, you can make the impression that you are moving somewhere and nobody is requiring anything from you, any outcomes. But this is not the way to go. But let me please tell a couple of words about the successful reforms. So this is the reform of decentralization. We are now moving into direction of the green movement, into the support of the local citizens and local businesses. And in terms of energy efficiency, we also have made a great progress. So this is an effective reform, and they are successful. And we need those reforms not only in Ukraine, because they are really practical and tangible. Like, I would not come up with new reforms. Like, I'm coming back to my previous statement. Let us take effort to finish those reforms that we already started, and then we go step by step towards the right aim. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think this is the way to go.
Yeah, by the way, talking about reforms from a German perspective is sometimes also a bit absurd. We have a lot of difficulties with this, and even in Berlin sometimes for 15 years there can't be put up a new red light on the crossing, for example. So changing something is really a difficult process, and the pace in which it goes on in Ukraine is really amazing, nevertheless. Mr. Stanowski, reforms, especially local level, what can, for example, from Western countries, from the perspective of Ukraine, for example, from Poland, what can be done to support, to strengthen these kind of reforms and the local communities within?
At some level, I used to support decentralization reform from the national level. But as I represent the city of Lublin, the city which is 80 kilometers from the border, we are really involved in the partnership with our partner cities. We have 9 partner cities in Ukraine. And together with our partner cities from Western Europe, with Minster, with Nancy, with other partner cities, from the first moment of full-scale invasion, we were assisting first with humanitarian assistance. Definitely it was the first, supporting refugees, transferring them around Europe. But I understood something very important about recovery in spring 22. It was April when suddenly I started to get the new requests from Sumy, our partner city. Not about humanitarian aid, not about rice, not about salt, but about seeds and seedings. They intending to grow, to work back on the fields. And then I understood, this is about recovery. This is not when you pass the Ukrainian facility of... No. When people understand that the future is about growing agriculture, not only the war. And what we learned from our partnership relations, that support from European Union shouldn't go from the government to government. 2 years ago, I would give the example that on every box of rice you have slogan from American people. No, today I will not say that. But yes, this is something so important. Last year, Lublin financed and built 4 bomb shelters in Sumy. Strange gift for the partner city, but this is the gift you need in this situation. And that means that we have the permanent projects about water facilities, about local governance, about ecological issues. And today we have in Lublin the group of doctors from Frankivsk. We are working together on the rehabilitation issues. This is not only medical rehabilitations. That means the recovery should be from the communities all over Europe to Ukrainian communities, implemented together in ideal situation with 3 or 4 lateral cooperation. Ukrainian community, Polish, German, French, or others. This is long-term investment, helping Ukrainian colleagues to understand better European Union and helping colleagues from European Union better understand Ukraine. This is what recovery is about.
I have to make a break because Mr. Kachka is with us now. Hello, good evening, Mr. Kachka. You can hear me? You can hear us? Great. Let me just very briefly introduce you to our audience. Mr. Kachka is Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic Integration of Ukraine. He served before as the Deputy Minister for Economic Development, Trade and Agriculture in Ukraine. He's an expert in international law and was a member of the Ukrainian delegation or negotiating team for the Ukraine-EU Association Agreement. And before, by the way, he worked as a Deputy Executive Director at the International Renaissance Foundation. Mr. Kachka, we have talked about reforms, the EU integration process. We have talked also about local communities and local communities as a backbone of resilience. First of all, I wanted to ask, how was the meeting with the Prime Minister? We can't hear you. Sorry. No, sorry, we can't hear you. Can we do something to get some noise? Okay. Mr. Kachka, we were talking about reforms, EU integration process. Ukraine is in a very difficult situation because on one hand you have to fight this war against Russia. On the other hand, you have to do reforms according to the standards and the demands of the European Union. To which extent both of it is feasible and what is not possible under the circumstances of being in war? cannot hear you. I'm very sorry about it. Okay, we will try to fix it, and I will ask some of the other. That means, Ms. Hopp-Nishanka, you wanted to add something to what Mr. Stanowski had said.
Yeah, happy to elaborate. And I think what you point out again is really, really important. We sometimes forget to mention that of course recovery has many different dimensions, right? And we look at it not with regards only to physical infrastructure and rebuilding destroyed buildings, but in a much more comprehensive way, that it also includes the economic recovery that you were mentioning in the agricultural sector of course, continuing to farm the land, to clear it of mines and explosives, but that also make sure that the economy continues to function, to provide jobs, basically, and income for people. But also importantly, maybe the social recovery side, which I think often gets a bit neglected, but is very important in the longer run. Maybe also the shorter run, actually, because people very often, when being displaced, need immediately support. There are also, of course, vulnerable groups and parts in society that need support, the elderly people or families that have been dislocated. These aspects require, because they have such a large scale in Ukraine now, where just earlier I was in a discussion, I was told that actually probably 1/3 of the population will have already acquired some kind of post-traumatic stress syndrome. So the need for social support, for social recovery measures, for also funding, support to society for people to deal with the impact of the aggression, the Russian aggression on Ukraine, is of tremendous importance. We must not look at recovery only with regards to buildings and roads and bridges that are being destroyed, but it's really important also to maintain the social fabric. And again, this happens in the communities on the ground, where people stand by each other, where the needs of people are expressed more closely, and where then in the city councils, very difficult discussions have to be taken of how to support the people in your community and what are the most important needs. And this is why it is indeed important to think about how funding reaches the municipalities. It is very difficult to bring funding from the state budget. There are but means from the EU, from the donors, from civil society support, from municipalities, as you were pointing out, to also support the communities on the ground directly. And that is very important, complementary to what can be done from the national level. Maybe now I bridge the gap.
Yeah, we try the second time, Mr. Kachka, once again. Thank you for your patience.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Great. Just in short, once again, we're talking about reforms on the way to the EU accession. Ukraine is in a very difficult situation. You have to fight a war, and on the other hand, you have certain demands from the European Union, standards, reforms, etc. To which extent this can go together, both, and might be some reforms have just to wait because it's not possible during wartime in war condition?
Yeah, I think that we have a really good intellectual community in this gathering, and so that's why I'm even more happy that you can hear me than you are, so that, and you glad. So, and you know that in my let's say reading, I once discovered a sentence from Slavoj Žižek about his experience of writing books during war in Yugoslavia, and someone asked him how you can do this, and he said that in the darkest day of war in Yugoslavia, a lot of people tried to save them by living as normal as possible. And this is, for me, at that time, it was something like a discovery. So now we live through the same experience, Russian aggression and constant shelling, so that they really bring traumatic experience everywhere. So not only on front line, but on front line in the cities like Kharkiv, it is like 24/7 a nightmare of war. But for people, it is important to live as normal life as possible, because they don't want to give up. Because if you give up on your daily life, then you lose war. And that's why we need reforms. Ukraine is a state in transition, final stage of transition after planned Soviet economy of all life, not only industrial or business, but generally all the dimensions of life. So our society transformed into something unique, Ukrainian society with its traditions in different regions. So the local communities with decentralization, with more, let's say, life on the local level and less planning, less centralized state. And that's why for us it is important to go this road. And that's why the goal to integrate to the European Union is a goal of continuation of these positive developments in Ukraine that happened during last years or decades. And I am really glad that we went out of the sleepy post-Soviet society into really open society with a lot of discussions, a lot of debates, and today even when my government, so that the government I work in is facing one of biggest crises in terms of corruption, and we try to also to see it through the lenses of changing of political culture. That scandals can happen, but the question is that how you react on these scandals with using the competences of anti-corruption institutions that have been established and developed to the stage or to the level when they can actually discover corruption, high-level political corruption. And for us, this is a very sad lesson, but learned lesson that these things are happening. And that's why now we are trying to clean the government, the governance, the state-owned enterprises from the people with vested interest in a way that is, let's say, clearly European one, with applying criminal law when it is possible, and anti-corruption investigation, and applying the EU and OECD corporate governance things. But this is something really technocratic. I think that what is important is that we do really care about people, and sometimes it's perceived as populist things like giving them support, social support, even despite the war, and another is to think about development of communities, of hromadas, and it is important for many reasons. Ukraine faced a profound shake of Ukrainian society. A lot of IDPs are changing the demography in local communities around the state. We have bigger cities, so that the cities like Kharkiv and Dnipro actually grab a lot of people from small cities that are closer to frontline, and they are getting bigger. That's why urban life is more important. A lot of IDPs are moving from East Ukraine to Western Ukraine. That's why life in small communities, traditional communities with values, rather conservative values, is also shaken by people from other regions, and it also requires some care and also more local policies. So all these things require continuation of reforms, and we have a lot of motivation on this, and that's why it is not like so it's easier to assume that we will go the path of reform. It is more difficult because Russia is destroying a lot of infrastructure and a lot of networks that are necessary for normal function of society, like energy grids or railways. But at the same time, you see that Ukrainian society is fully functional. And I think that it's also a sign that we are not giving up. That's why we continue reforms.
Maybe some applause for you. I just want to stress that here on the podium, when you weren't here, everybody was especially, or expressed especially, that reforms, the pace of reforms in Ukraine so far is really great. And so we understand that the way of reforms is going through in Ukraine. You have mentioned the corruption case, which was a topic a bit for us too. Are you afraid that this case could have a negative impact on partners in Western countries, especially of the European Union, of course?
The news is such is damaging. It is clear, so that this is a scandal in midst of war, and we have like really the huge and very unpleasant discoveries of what have been happening in the energy sector. And for us, you know, that the damage is really big. But what is important, and I also highlighted in July, that what is important is a reaction to this. So that whether you fix the problem, whether you punish those who are guilty, whether the criminal investigation are going on, whether government is making all necessary decisions to suspend people, to fire people, to improve the quality of governance. And if yes, then this is a sign that we are becoming healthier society. So that's that no one is saying that, you know, that war will explain everything. No, this is not our approach. And I'm really glad that I'm working with people and in government that have the same thinking. And we, from the very first moment, we had a clear view that no one will defend the ministers that are part of this scandal. So it is their task to go through investigations. It will be done later. But now we cannot allow any shadow to be present in our government. So that's why for me it is also a positive sign. So that's the reforms are really working, so that we can do some positive things in all dimensions, in reforms in anti-corruption and reforms in energy sector as well. So that's why this bad damage can be mitigated by reaction of Ukrainian government, and we try to communicate with all our partners, and most of all with domestic partners, with civil society organizations, with MPs, with everyone, and we see some positive feedbacks. This is already a good start. Of course, we have a lot of emotions, and if the government will be successful in ensuring that we will mitigate all the risks and we will do everything in line with EU rules, then it will be success out of the problem. So that's why, you know, every storm is an opportunity, and we are trying to use this approach, but it does not neglect the fact that it is really damaging to have these such cases in time of war, when we really depend on financial support of our partner, because we are calculating every hryvnia to send to the front line. So that's why we are even more irritated on the fact that these things are happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you still have 20 minutes to be with us, Mr. Kachka?
Yes. I'm with you till the end of this session. Yes, so that when you will say that I can drop off, I will do. So now or later.
Thanks a lot. Because we now go over to questions from the audience here, and might be there will be questions to you too. We still have about 20 minutes. So now is the possibility for you to ask questions to the speakers. We have microphones, and I don't see a lot. There's a microphone. Here is one question, and over there, and over there. Let's take these three in the beginning. Then you and you. just a moment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hello, good evening. My name is Mark Stefan Hübner, Protestant Church of Germany. We do establish many humanitarian diachronic projects in former Yugoslavia, and I was there when I was a student. So you mentioned we are facing the same, well, almost same problem topics and we have experienced 30 years ago with human security in post-Yugoslav areas and a decentralized recovery organized also by NGOs, by churches, by other organizations. So I think we should see how we can imagine the experiences we have made 30 years ago into former democratic, free Ukraine. I'm responsible, for instance, for Slovenia. The Protestant organization supported humanitarian aid to more than 25,000 people. Addition now, a couple of thousand Ukrainian refugees, which are all mainly refunded by NGOs, not by the Slovene government, not by the Federal Republic of Germany, but by the Protestant Church, by the GAW, Gustav Adolf Werk, excuse to say it in Germany. And we are very proud to develop more than 600,000 euros in Ukraine for humanitarian aid. So my question is, how could we find this together in a perspective way?
This is a question from your perspective to whom, especially?
Yes.
To whom?
Well, to everyone.
Okay. Okay, we collect. This is the first one. Then we had a question here in the first row. Yeah.
Hi, Taras. This is my question to you. First of all, I would like to say to all of us that from my point of view, Taras is a very strong top officer now in the Ukrainian government. Fantastic. I'm happy to be, this kind of, to know Taras. Taras was some time, he was a deputy director of the International Renaissance Foundation. Because of that, I'm directly ask Taras. Taras, you do know the civil society, activism, ideas, strategies, tactics, etc. What do you think? What should be a role of civil society now during this very unpleasant scandal during the wartime? What could be role of civil society? What civil society people who are not on front line and now in this audience, what should be their activities? What we should do now to raise people to go on the Maidan and demonstrate against the government, or to do something another? You are a very experienced person. Please advise us.
Okay, we take a third question and then we come back to all the speakers.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Well, good evening, Alexandra Koider, Kyiv School of Economics. I have a question to all four speakers, if you could reflect from your level of governance and your perspective. So the question is, what themes would you see as useful for municipal cooperation between Ukrainian and German and Ukrainian and Polish municipalities in terms of EU integration and the EU accession of Ukraine? So could you be as specific as possible what themes, topics, kind of projects could be subject of such municipal cooperation to increase, to make faster European integration of Ukraine?
Maybe we start with this question because we still have it in the ears. So this is a question, which kind of municipal cooperations could be the best way on the way to EU accession? Who wants to start? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Lukov.
Дякую. Є певний розрив
There is a gap between No, maybe it's mundane, but I have to say it. So we have a lot of very big residential buildings. So this is a difference between us and European Union and even Poland. Ukraine has these huge apartment buildings. So, and we have to help those people, the inhabitants, and we have some very successful projects about reconstruction. We have a program about energy efficiency, the equipment of these buildings. But we need this expertise on the same level from municipalities. We understand in Germany it's mostly private or it's been rented. We have also the Polish experience. It's a mixed situation. It's a little bit more similar to us, but we have these notion that the people only own the apartment and the rest they don't care about the cellars or the stairs, and so this management of these buildings, it's a very big topic for us on the local level, and it would lead us, it would help us to grow as a society and to be more responsible in managing of these very big residential buildings. We need expertise here, and it would be maybe a step towards integration into the European Union, because we need common projects here. I don't want to take your time.
From the position of the practitioner, what Lublin is doing in what areas? The culture. We cooperate with the culture institutions from our partner cities. It's about education. Now, school exchange is more complicated, but in 2 weeks we'll have 30 children from Sumy staying in Lublin for 2 weeks. The energo-effectiveness. Wait, think about a moment. There is one country worldwide when you can talk with every housewife about energo-effectiveness. It's Ukraine. This is the only country where every member of the family understands how much energy is using each equipment, how much you have in your battery, how you can use that. Definitely worth to cooperate in this area. Water management, waste management, definitely. But I would also rehabilitation, something obvious, public transportation. But I would say the areas which usually we are not thinking about, e-governance. In Ukraine, e-governance also on the community, city level is definitely better develop that in Germany, France and Poland together. Finally, security. Believe me, my city is 80 kilometers from the border. The drones are getting us, Russian drones are getting to us directly from the border. The security issue, shelters, is not a joke for us at all.
These were a lot of very concrete ideas too. You wanted to add something, Ms. Hopp-Nishanka?
Sure, no, just very briefly, but I think you outlined the most important areas of collaboration already, and this mirrors what topics are of interest to the German-Ukrainian municipal partnerships. So there are more than 270 by now. Of partnerships between German municipalities and Ukrainian municipalities directly, some of them together trilaterally in a triangle with Polish municipalities. We're trying to get more of these trilateral ones, because then they become stronger even and connecting us within Europe. But the topics that you mentioned are very, very important. And I think here, really, you also can see the learning in both ways. You mentioned e-governance, digitalization. We can definitely learn from that. Defense, security, cybersecurity, very physical security, dealing with drones around airports and things like that. We can learn from, but also in terms of reforms, because, for example, in the health sector, where Ukraine has to now face very difficult decisions of how to provide health services and which hospitals to rehabilitate and rebuild and which not, because demography has changed in the country, people have moved. The same discussion is taking place in Germany just now, exactly the same one. How far is your next hospital? How do you transport people to get there if you cannot afford in a certain region to have a hospital anymore? So these are topics that municipalities find for each other and discuss jointly and find solutions together. Apart from that, I think there are many other different direct connections. So there are hospital partnerships, a whole network of hospitals collaborating directly. This is another way of enhancing cooperation. Municipal corporations, service providers, how can they learn from each other? You mentioned sewage and others. And these practical connections, I think, something that we can connect more also with the work of civil society and NGOs. We would very much like to try to combine these efforts and find ways how, and this is very unheard of, and we have to innovate a little bit, how, when we look at a local situation, what is needed there, we can support you in finding the best way of fitting all the pieces of the puzzle together with NGO support, with support from businesses, and donations, private donations, with municipal partnerships and with government funds, so that you can figure out a good solution on the ground. And I think we want to be part of figuring out how that puzzle can be put together and how tools can be provided to municipalities to do this in the most effective way and not to reinvent the wheel. But there is a lot of learning with a shoulder-to-shoulder program and many others through the associations that you anyway are doing already.
With the Mr. Kachka, I will come to you. By the way, a very important idea that we have talked about several times this evening was what we, for example, from a German or European Union perspective, what we can learn from Ukraine. And this was stressed once again. Maybe you want to add something, but there was also a direct question to you what concerns civil society in front of the background of the scandal in Ukraine.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I see that I'm like on a screen among you, so that it also recalls some sci-fi novel from I don't know, 1920s or 1930s. Yeah, so that's for me it's still a little bit strange. So I apologize that I am online, and I would be glad to be with you to discuss all these things. So that I think that I am glad that I cannot assume all the way of cooperation with municipalities that actually happen and their tradition, and this is extremely good news for me, because what is important for us is that transformation and application of EU rules is not a museum, it's not a cargo process. That's we are talking. So we are doing as well the transformation in the daily life of people, and it happens only with involvement of local communities and the Hromadas. But there is one implication there. I think that what is important is the two-way road between the reforms in Ukraine on national level with application of EU rules, and especially on the let's say so-called markets of the things that are important on local level, like energy or heat or water supply. And I think that the sharing experience, especially experience with Polish and German municipalities, on how the let's say, community should use these tools in terms of investment, in terms of, let's say, more decentralization of supply of these services is extremely important. So that's a way how to use what is adopted on national level. But at the same time, if municipalities will actively use the rules that are EU rules that are implemented in Ukraine, it means that municipalities will bring life into these reforms. I think that is extremely important, and what is more important is that it can also help with current challenges. For example, decentralized electricity or heat supply with using equipment that can be, let's say, more tailor-made for the life of particular city or village is really could be a reply to a challenge of the destructions caused by Russian Federation. Then the particular question of Yevgen, so my really sort of gratefulness to all support that Yevgen provided to me for all my life and also the years in the International Renaissance Foundation. So I think that civil society in Ukraine is extremely unique. So that's this is I think that the perfect mix of different cultures like American activism or European students movement activism, and as well some intelligentsia approach that also exists like Central European phenomenon. So that's why civil society is extremely different in Ukraine and unique, and I'm really proud that we have this let's say field or dimension of Ukrainian society. What I see as being in government, and I see that first of all, I will be glad if civil society will continue to criticize us, so that this critical approach, reassessment of what government is doing is necessary thing, not only government, parliament, president, so the government sensu largo. This criticism is extremely important. But then also there is another role of civil society in Ukraine as a source of knowledge of what should be done. And then it means that criticism should be combined with an no input into the reforms that are going on. We had this experience for many years. It started like many years ago, and I think that we need to continue the same way. The only thing is, as this is also what I always highlight, is that we always have a choice either to radicalize or not to radicalize, so in dialogue or in relation to government. This is a very sensitive element, since it is also a part of our public order, so that's the level of radicalization and criticizing the government to the level that leads also to resigning or change of power. So it's absolutely necessary part of our public order, but this is something that intangibly should be wisely decided by civil society as well. In my opinion, the conditions of Ukraine, and particularly war and Russian war, means that we need to be as wise as possible and to continue to be critical but constructively engaged with government. It is more important than just to pursue the interest of this criticism per se, yeah, as it is. So that's I try to be a little bit diplomatic, but for me it's very sensitive, because when a representative of government is talking about civil society organizations, it is always assessed critically as something that I do not trust, or civil society organizations or something like that. Quite opposite. For me, it is important that the only way to ensure legitimacy in Ukrainian public order, so that let's go beyond the legitimacy of government institutions only, but public order, we need engagement of civil society with all your roles and active engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. And we had third. That means the first question, which was, to put it short, about a comprehensive effort of support and democracy support. Yeah?
I think we do that. We should do that all the time, and we do that all the time. And I remember the support from Germany during the martial law in Poland, and assistance to the political prisoners at that time. In Ukraine, it was the situation that immediately, including Protestant communities, but also other religious communities, joined us and asked in what way you can go with the humanitarian aid through the border, as it wasn't so easy on the first days. And it should be something what is natural and what should be done both as a territorial communities as well as religious communities. This is our natural responsibility. If you need any special contacts, we will be pleased to assist you in Ukraine also. Thank you.
I have to admit that I still have in my ears the words of Mr. Ambassador that we are so punctual in Germany, which might be a myth, but nevertheless, I would like to still have 2 but short questions, and then we have to go over to the next point, but 2 questions would be possible. Brief, if possible.
Я зрозуміла.
Yes, I understand. Very brief. First of all, I would like to seize the opportunity and thank Germany and Poland for their support. And just one question and one comment. The comment, I am a scientist and civil society activist. I would be happy if we could refuse like this wording like high-level panel or something. We could find something more democratic and not hierarchical names. And that was a comment and now question. In our community, we use and we also propose to use it for you, or explain why do you use renewing and not rebuilding. I think we are working on rebuilding new Ukraine. Thank you.
So if there's a second, here is one. If you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the conversation. Anna Ackerman, International Institute for Sustainable Development. Considering here the stage is partially green and we are the Heinrich Böll Foundation. I wanted to ask about one aspect of human security, it's environmental security, which is also very important to deliver what is written here, the name of the discussion. How to balance environmental, economic, and social aspects in recovery. The Ministry of Environment was liquidated this summer, and we see the consequences of this already today. So it's a question to Mr. Kachka, first and foremost, but also to our other panel speakers. I'm wondering how you see that. How do you see how to balance these questions? Thank you.
And as we say in Germany, the best is nevertheless 3. Then a third question, please.
Rebecca Harms, I'm using the opportunity to ask a question also to Taras, because you are here today also for us the only official representative of the Ukrainian government. And for sure, everybody had a lot of thoughts about the news during the last weeks. And I use the opportunity to ask you, what can we expect as change in Kyiv beyond the punishment, the fair punishment court cases against all those who have been guilty for the recent corruption cases? What can we expect? So we hear discussions about a new approach in the government. maybe a government of more unity again, a government with less friends from business and the old times, because these questions are of utmost importance. I get them also from my Ukrainian friends. How are we escaping from the impression that the old system, which caused people going to the Maidan, risking their lives, what changes can we expect to really fight against the return of the old patterns, of the old system? I know that during the war, nobody had appetite to discuss those ugly issues. But when it appears that the system is still alive, we need more than only some people going to court. Thanks.
Yeah, Mr. Kachka, the third question were directed to you. You have the floor.
Okay, so I will destroy all your punctuality. Sorry for this, because it's the questions are too broad. So I think that first on environment, yeah, so that it's also not really comfortable as a question of corruption. First and foremost, I think that there are things where I am quite sharp. Yeah, so that Ministry of Environment was not liquidated, so that it was merged within Ministry of Economy. And what we discovered that so that the separate Ministry of Environment used to be the biggest ministry in our government as an institution, so that we discovered that we have only like several people, literally like 2 people responsible for climate policy, for forest policy, for a lot of policy making, and that's why we have a lot of majority of the proposals for exemptions and transitional periods in environment in our accession with the accession negotiations with the EU are related to the fact that we had extremely weak ministry, and we need to improve it. And what Ministry of Economy is doing now is improving the quality of governance in environment. Unfortunately, it was a zombie ministry that relied 100% on NGOs, and we really appreciate the expert support of NGOs, but we really need capable Ministry of Environment in order to ensure the balanced approach between economic development, environmental protection, and we have a lot of complex questions. We don't know what to do with ETS. We don't know what will be the map of protected areas for natural development, what to do with waste management and so on. We need capable governance here, and we really unfortunately discovered that the separate Ministry of Environment as an institution was extremely weak. So that's why we are thinking how to improve it, and improve it not only with support, expert support of different projects or civil society organizations, but to improve it itself. So I need capable people in government working on environment, and I need dozens of them. So that's why, please, if you have energy or have possibility, join Ministry of Economy relevant departments. I know that in the recent future it will be detached from Ministry of Economy, because it should be a really big, good ministry. But at this moment, I think that what was done is really for the good for environmental policy of Ukrainian government. I know that I am perceived among environmental activists as rather person defending industrial development, but this is exactly by intellectual request that we really need to think about how to improve life of people and environment as well. So this balance should be approached. Unfortunately, we see that the rhetoric of environmental policy in Ukraine is rather not people-oriented or not economic development-oriented. So that's why we need to also to critically reassess the general discussion on environment in Ukraine, both in terms of our accession to the EU, but also to the needs of Ukrainian society. And the part of it, we have a lot of topics that are most complicated. You remember the big discussion about Kakhovka Dam the immediate environmental damage it did. Then the discussion about how this territory should be environmentally protected. But then it resulted also to the local climate change, because the humidity in the surrounding areas and the change in humidity, the change in the circulation of water in neighboring regions led to the droughts in the south of Ukraine. So there are a lot of things to do, and we need a lot of brains to deal with it. On corruption, I think that, Rebecca, I really like your question. It's absolutely correct. The question is how to move forward. So this is the question. So that I don't think that, with all due respect to my really friends in parliamentary group of European Solidarity, that the coalition with them is rather will be step back to the backwards, so that to our past, yes, or not for the future. I would rather look for improvement and inviting new people, more technocratic people. I myself treat myself as a rather technocratic member of government, and our prime minister is as well has this approach, and there are a lot of other colleagues. Yesterday we had a meeting with supervisory boards of energy company, and this is literally dozens of people around the world with a lot of knowledge and credibility in these areas. And we believe that this is as well a capital that we can use, social capital or intellectual capital that we can use for making things better. But then, of course, there is a classical question of legitimacy in the context of this scandal of the scale. This is a question to president, to parliament, and there are a lot of debates on this, and I think that we will see how things are developing. And my feeling for the moment, what I hear from debates, is that these developments will be very constructive and future-oriented. So this is my bet, my expectation, but we will see in forthcoming days how whether they will become reality. Thank you.
Thank you. And we come back to you. You can answer to it. I would like to start with Ms. Hopp-Nishanka, and then Mr. Stanowski, Mr. Lukov.
So maybe just picking up on the question of the green recovery, because we were earlier talking about the different dimensions of recovery, and we spoke about the economic and the social already, of course, the physical of rebuilding. And the question, why do we speak about renewing or rebuilding, I think really goes to the idea and the notion that was by the Ukrainians already introduced at the very beginning of the full-scale invasion and the first discussions about how rebuilding should take place, that it is actually not just rebuilding how the past status quo was, but to move forward and build forward, or build back better, as they say some things, but I like building forward even better. So that goes with regards to the green recovery, to use of renewable energies, to decentralized approaches instead of rebuilding the centralized old ways when you look at energy, but it's also true for many other areas. And if I may comment on bringing the ministries together, maybe there is to a certain extent a potential of greening the Ministry of Economy now, rather than looking at the dilemma only, but there will be a dilemma, and there will be tough negotiations for sure, because sometimes you have to ensure that ecological standards are fulfilled. It's a challenge. I think we have to be very honest about this also in the current situation, when it is very much about fixing stuff quickly, that it's very difficult to uphold these standards. And there will be many more really challenging debates, for example, about land use, about repurposing lands, for example, about setting up new economic recovery zones. We're talking about tourism here, for example. We're talking about preserving natural parks. There will be difficult debates. And again, this brings us back to the local communities, because only the local communities will be the ones to monitor what's happening on the ground. And also to blow the whistle when they think, you know, there will be encroachment in national parks and things like that when we talk about some of the ecological issues that are there. And therefore, we are so adamant that recovery has to be taking place and be led at the local level and also monitored at the local level, because only then people can tell us whether assistance reaches them or not.
Mr. Stanowski, we are in front of the buffet, so...
Yeah. As the question was asked in Ukrainian, я попробую відповісти державну українську мову.
I'll try to give you the answer in Ukrainian, the state language of Ukraine. Well, recovery or rebuilding? Well, in the first place, this is not a question toward the Poles or to the French or to the Germans. This is the question to the Ukrainians in the first place. Because building a state, nation, is not only about military, is not about only education and so on and so forth. This is the way you talk about your nationality and your sovereignty to others. Well, frankly, the experience from Lugano was not the perfect one. When they started talking about who is going to rebuild what, this was not a perfect way to do it. But we are looking forward for the answer, because eventually how this is going to be done, the Ukrainians shall decide about it. It will not be people from Brussels or from Berlin or from any other state, not the neighbors. On the other hand, I can remember me coming into prison. So it was about Solidarność, so this was long ago, and I don't know how this is to call in Ukraine. Like, this was a man who had a high rank among the prisoners, among the inmates, and he said, Mr. Stanowski, I can tell you the first 10 years in prison are the most hard ones. Like, he was aware of what he was talking about. And this is the same here, like the first 10 years of rebuilding is the most difficult thing, but we are waiting for the strong Ukraine to arrive into our European communities of strong democracies. Thank you.
So there's a lot to learn in prisons, as we see. Mr. Lukov, you have the last word.
Well, I can see the light from the buffet. Maybe they want to leave us without the lighting here in this hall. Like, I'm giving you an example from Mykolaiv. It is April 2022. The mayor of the city is going around with a machine gun, and he has his assistant who is also bearing a machine gun and a vest, and we drink desalted water from Liman. And we had negotiations with UNO about funding a master plan for the city of Mykolaiv, which we would be implementing after the end of the war. And a company from Milano helped us preparing it, with taking into account all the norms of human life for the next future. I mean, this shall be the way for our city to move to, for us to move to together with our partners. While rebuilding, well, some things just need to be rebuilt, you know? Like, we are going to go that way together in rebuilding our city. So we have already our document. It has been amended, not amended, that adopted, and again, it emerged in April 2022.
So I still need 40 of your seconds. because I want to have some, or I have to give you some closing remarks. First of all, of course, I want to thank to all the speakers, spontaneous, non-spontaneous, offline, online. Thank you for having been.